20 vices of democracy. Has democracy become a trap for India, which is facing rival countries from all sides, rather enemy countries from all sides? China and other South Asian countries like Bangladesh. So we'll start with a brief introduction of democracy. Democracy, as we know, was a 19th and 20th century project of Anglo-Saxon world. It was developed in Europe in 18th and 19th century, but given a totally new shape by US in 20th century after First World War and Second World War, and international institutions like UN, World Bank, IMF were created to launch democracy in the newly decolonized countries. The result of democracy in 20th century makes it clear that, like globalization, democracy has benefited mainly Western world, Europe and America. When it comes to Asia and Europe, Asia and Africa, then the performance and the outcomes are dismal, disappointing. On the other hand, the countries which chose to adopt a different path, like China, they have not only used liberalism, capitalism, and democracy all for their own benefits, but rather China has emerged as the biggest power, the greatest power on earth now. So, who actually have benefited from democracy? Europe and America. So, what about India, which for last 75 years has been has been trying to carry the entire burden of democracy by sacrificing all its core national interest like growth, development, stability, security. Where is the security? Internal security, external security, growth, development, infrastructure. Everything is now owned by China. So this democracy, as we have implemented it, has no doubt it has benefited mainly the masters of democracy. It was democracy as we inherited from Britain was a leftover of colonialism. The Britishers, while living India, they left democratic so-called institutions to India, by which they could govern or control India not through institutionally, but through values. So Western values. So even if they left India, but their values continued to govern India, benefiting all Europe and later on America. So, what are the 20 vices of this democracy? One is it is a colonial leftover. It is not our ingenious or our own traditional genius. It's a colonial leftover. So, democracy in India is a colonial leftover. Second, it is inseparable from Western civilizational values. So, it is inseparable from Westernization. So what we have done in the name of democracy is forcing our societies and our people to undergo a forced westernization. So in last 70 years, 25 years, what we have been doing under democracy is forcing our people to convert to westernism. So it's a forced conversion. I will detail. Third is the political instability. It has caused immense political instability. If we compare it with China, only then we can understand. So, in India, we have immense cost of political instability. What are the cost of political instability? Economic instability, security problem, Maoism, Naxalism, insurgency, separatist movements, law and order problems, Gunda Raj, Mafia Raj, Bahubali Raj, and criminal Raj. And in this kind of anarchy, there is no possibility for economy to grow, industries to grow. Industrialists could not achieve their goals which they otherwise have achieved in last 10 years. So what has been achieved in last 10 years could not be achieved in 100 years also. So why in last 10 years? Because somehow we have in last 10 years we have learned the lesson how to manage the democracy. But in previous 70 years, 75, 60 years, 65 years, it was all about giving full environment to democracy. So political instability has created these problems: economic instability, growth problem, 3.5% growth for 70 years, so 60 years, and security problem, Maoism, Naxalism, insurgency, Northeast insurgency, and Kashmir terrorism, and all separatism in all parts of India. And so a lawless society cannot think of developing a commercial environment, entrepreneurial environment. So then delayed goals. So barely even 30-35% goals of uh, planned development could be realized. And if we compare the same with China, then they have achieved what America realized in 150 plus years. Then civil conflicts. So we have become, in the name of democracy, what we have become a religion divided and a caste divided and language and region divided society. Who actually is to be blamed for our perpetual and unstoppable caste division, which creates a permanent civil war like situation? The common Indian lives in an environment of disharmony, fear, hatred, and perpetual sense of perpetual loss, and that leads to loss of their self confidence, permanently living in an hostile environment, caste divided environment. So, what has caused this permanent division? It's electoral democracy that could have been well managed. So, we can't suggest that India should have not adopted democracy, but it should have been a different type of democracy, which was to be guided by our uncompromisable goals. And the goals were growth, employment, infrastructure, world class infrastructure, and controlling the capacity to control our neighboring countries, and never to let China to surpass India. That were These were to be our uncompromisable goals. And if democracy allowed us to realize this goal, then we should have adopted the democracy with all inbuilt mechanism to help democracy, rather to use democracy to realize these goals. Then what has happened? Civil society and individual division between society and individual. Democracy, as I said, this is based on Western value. So extreme individualism, absolute individualism has kept our society disgruntled and ruined, almost ruined, especially in this era. Society gets it's becoming ruined because of the individual versus society division. Democracy in India has benefited more Westerners like Europe and America than Indian people, because Europeans and Americans can cause any time protest, demonstration, and movement, and they can activate some NGOs by funding them, and to create all kind of trouble and economic distress in India. They can stop industrialization in India through protest, etc. So Western countries have used democracy in India for their own economic and geostrategic and strategic purposes. They have used it to stop economic growth of India also. They have used it to destabilize Indian economy also. They have used it to stop Indian industrialization also. And so overall, democracy in India has benefited more to the Western countries, European countries, America, and of course China. Democracy has benefited even in Pakistan. Indian democracy has more benefited Pakistan. Indian democracy has more benefited to Bangladesh, to all our hostile countries. Indian democracy has benefited everyone except India. Except India. It's very difficult to to enumerate or to get some concrete and tangible goals enumerated. It's very difficult. So overall, the enemies of in India have benefited immensely from the democratic processes in India. So it doesn't mean again that democracy itself is a vice, but the way you operate it, that's the problem. So how to decide how to operate democracy? It can be decided only when your macro goals are clear. Unless your macro goals are clear, so democracy is not going to benefit. So democracy was needed to be operated under the broader directions of macro objectives. But since we are not clear and confident about our macro goals, and that is why it has been operated against India and against the core values and interests of India. And even after 75 years, India remains so widely divided. So, who has kept India divided? It's electoral democracy, in which the divisions were more highlighted than the processes of unification. So, had the process of unification been the core objective of democracy, then this is how democracy would have benefited India. So, instead of unity, so diversity leading to separatism was promoted somehow. So, our democratic goals themselves were not clear. Then there are conflict between deliberation and execution. Democracy puts too much emphasis, excessive emphasis on deliberative processes. So when your entire resource, time, and energy is utilized for deliberation, unending deliberation, inconclusive, unactionable deliberations, then certainly your execution is going to be weak. But the outcomes are generated not by unending deliberation, but by execution. So we lost the battle between execution and deliberation. Deliberation became the norm in India on the university campuses, on the streets, on the roads, parliament, everywhere, media houses, everywhere. Deliberation, and this excessive deliberation took away from us our genius to realize the goals, outcomes from execution. So we became a culture which didn't have the genius in execution. We became a culture of too much of debate and discussion. We became an infamous and notorious for consistently failing in execution. Then democracy has been hijacked by left, and of course I must not hesitate in saying Islamic expansion. So democracy has been, and the space within democracy has been used more by leftist and the communist minded people to carry out their own unachievable agenda. The leftist people have an unachievable agenda, but they cannot achieve it, but they they want to make bad use of or negative use of democratic space. And the same is Islamic expansionism. In popular language, it is called Ghazwa Hind, etc. So democracy, of course, has been used to carry out these agendas also, the leftist agenda. Unachievable, but yet it caused immense loss to the immediate goals that India needed to badly to realize them. So democracy has supported more the leftist and Islamic expansionism. And democracy is also of late been used, especially after globalization, for refugee invasion. So India has been facing an invasion, an invisible invasion by refugees. And democratic system, the way it has been established and operated by the vested interest, it has been more used, especially through judiciary and the courts, through courts, to benefit more the invaders in the form of refugees. And international lobbies have funded NGOs through international network to keep India invading through refugees. More than 5 crores of refugees have have taken control of strategic locations and strategic resources of India. So democracy has been misused for the purpose of promoting refugees invasion in India. And on the other hand, democracy has also it dilutes the local identity, local rights, and it promotes an alien universalism. A kind of so the universalism is promoted by Westernism as a universal good, but this universalism is alien, and it ultimately starts working against all the local customs, culture, religion, and civilization. Thousands of years old of civilization has been subjugated and subordinated by alien universalism. So democracy is also proven to be anti-local, and it has promoted an alien universalism. And the next is so overall, democracy creates a sense of anarchy where there is no order, there is no law and order, there is no business, there is no economy, there is no growth, and mm, it compromises the internal security. So India has been a victim of weak internal security, the kind of internal security environment that we have witnessed in last 10 years. So Naxalism is being finished, terrorism in Kashmir finished, and insurgency finished, and not only finished but mainstreamed also. Though secessionists, separatists, isolationists, they all have been mainstreamed, and they're on the way to be mainstreamed. But a decade ago, the scenario was totally different. Maoism was the order of the day. Maoists almost said that they were ruling more than one fourth of India, 40% of India. They said is under their control, Red Corridor or Dandakaranya, etc. So there were many countries surviving within India. It's all under the broad sheltering of democracy. There was a time when, in the name of democracy, especially after emergency, press became so powerful, media became so powerful in India. During emergency, it was said media was muzzled, but post-emergency, under the protection of mm, judiciary, the kind of rulings that came from judiciary that created an impregnable fortress for press in India, and coalition governments were staged, or rather backstaged by, programmed by press. Press became so powerful. It is said, some people have said, and they're right, and that coalition governments were governed indirectly by the powerful press lobbies in India. So India was for long period has been governed by the press. और उसके आज भी जो remnants है वो इंडिया में आज भी है. Press is so powerful, and now they have always wanted to have a great say in the government. So these are the 20 vices of democracy. We need to continue. We need to take it forward. Each point needs further more elaboration. I will continue the elaboration, but the time has come to look at democracy from different angles also. Democracy is not only about the people of the government by the people. It's also government by the press. For some time in India, we have government by the press. So when we are faced with China, when we are faced with all kind of problems, despite our hard work and commitment, we are facing so many problems. So the time has come to reflect on and to look back our achievements and our losses and opportunity cost in last 75 years under democracy. Had it not been democracy, then what would have been our scenario? Of course, if there is no question of not having adopted democracy. The democracy was, of course, the natural choice for India. But as I said, had our macro goals been clear, then the democracy, its operation would have been totally different, and then the outcomes would have been minimum double of what we have realized. So we have lost half of our achievements because of wrong operation of democracy. Thank you. I will continue it.